Tommy Wolski is a former jockey who is still enthralled by horse racing. When a thoroughbred or standardbred moves around a track and the crowds roar, he still gets a few goosebumps. Wolski is a newspaper columnist and the host of a popular TV show which has moved to our house, Shaw TV. It is called The Sport of Kings, the show that is. It is my pleasure to welcome Tommy Wolski back to Studio 4 to tell us more. Congrats.
Man, I'm happy to be here, and this is fun. This is really fun being with you.
And finally, you came to the right side of the pond. You're on Shaw TV. That's good.
That is good.
The problem with you is you're from Boston.
Yeah.
Born there, right?
Yes, and I hear about it all the time.
I bet you do.
I have a Bruins hockey shirt someone gave me.
But you're not wearing it.
I didn't have the nerve to wear it, really.
No, but you can be anything but a Bruins fan today. You can be the basketball.
Red Sox, Patriots, and Celtics.
Patriots.
I have hats
Take
from
them.
all.
Because we don't have a basketball team anymore, you heard.
I heard.
So, who taught you to ride a thoroughbred? How did you get into the racing business?
When I was about 14, my uncle was an ex-professional fighter. And he looked at me and said, man, you're small, son. So I said, yeah, I am. He says, well, you're going to be a jockey? And I said, what's a jockey? And I had no idea what it was. So he says, well, I'm going to show you. So he took me to a racetrack. I'm living in Boston. Took me to a racetrack in Providence, Rhode Island. It's 65 miles away.
Right.
And I thought he knew everybody there. When we got there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he didn't know anybody. But he got in because people knew him. And we ran across a fella, an elderly fellow who must have been like 90 years old, Mr. Foster, who happened to break in jockeys, teach kids how to ride. And my Uncle Georgie, he introduced me to him. And the first thing Mr. Foster said was, how big are your feet? And I said, why is that? He said, well, just tell me. I said, 4.5. He said, 4.5? I said, wow, really? He says, well, you know what? He says, I can hire you because your feet, like puppies, kids will grow into their feet. So you can stay and be here, and that's how I got started.
Really?
Yeah.
So if you'd been a size 7, they just said,
gone.
go away. You're going to grow taller, you're going to get fatter, and all of that. And we go back a long ways, as you know, and my kids have always called you the jockey. And I think I've told this story before, but when you would come to our house and we'd have a few cocktails, my kids would say, Mom, when is the jockey going to grow? And I said, you don't want him to grow. Just want him to get on that horse.
I never grew.
You never grew. Well, you grew up, you know, up here.
I grew to 5'2" from 4'7".
Well, that's okay. That's a start. So, all the talk around the racetrack, often it's families, isn't it? It's so family driven. The kids were raised in the barn, the trainers were their grandpas and all of that stuff. How unusual is it for a jockey to be a jockey and come from a family like yours?
It is different. It is a lot. It is a sport with nepotism in it because everybody's involved. The part that grew up in the sport, their kids do it, you know, and it just goes right on generation after generation. So for me to do it, it was completely different. As a matter of fact, most of my friends here, in fact, I would say 99% of my friends here are not on the racetrack. They're away from the racetrack, so I don't get to visit many people that work in the business. It's just something I just felt like I wanted to do.
But you did write a column recently about whether it has a hockey connection.
Suitcase.
Yeah, Suitcase Smith, Gary Smith.
What a wonderful person. He is probably the most passionate horse racing fan I've ever met. Him and his son Marshall, they just live for horse racing. He's one of the few persons that he would rather see a horse race than a hockey game.
Really?
Yeah.
Don't tell anyone.
Oh. Well, he never did any alumni stuff, too, Suitcase.
Oh, really?
He beat it to his own
He's south.
ground.
He's living south now.
He lives right across from a racetrack, Del Mar in Southern California, near La Jolla or San Diego. And he lives there and goes to the track every day. You know.
Does he own a horse?
He did own a couple of horses. He owned a horse named after himself. And just like myself, I had a horse once named after me. They can never run. You want to get a horse beat, name him after
Name him after you.
Name him Kiefer.
Yes.
Name him Kiefer.
Okay.
Guarantee he won't run.
I had a horse named Fanny, and I think she got sold. She wasn't much of a racer. Okay. Ruler on Ice wins the Belmont Stakes. Long shot, muddy track. What did you make of that?
I was surprised by that horse winning, but long shots have been taken to Belmont. The thing I was happy about with that race and the Animal Kingdom getting beat is if any of those horses would have won the Triple Crown, which obviously it was only going to be Animal Kingdom because once he gets beat, he's out.
Right.
And when he got beat, I was happy because this is not a good bunch of 3-year-olds. And can you imagine putting Animals Kingdom's name on the list next to Secretariat, Affirmed, Alley Dog? He affirmed Seattle Salute. His name didn't belong up there, so I was glad he got beat. It would have tarnished the Triple Crown.
And what happened coming out of the gate? Jockey lost a stirrup. What happens when a jockey loses a stirrup?
Well, you try to get your foot put back in that stirrup. What happened with him? That horse stumbled when the horse next to him broke fast, came over, and they clipped heels. He stumbled, the horse, and the jock trying to stay on lost his balance. When he lost his balance, his left foot came out of the stirrup. So now he's got to do 2 things. He's got to hold his horse together, keep him out of trouble.
Right.
And then try to get his foot back in. There's a lot of things going to a jock's mind in a race.
I'm sure. And can you blame it on the other horse or the jockey or whom?
They're trying to blame another jock for it. He's denying I didn't do it. And the jock that rode Animal Kingdom, Velasquez, he's very, he's very articulate. And if you watched the interview, the interviewer tried to get him to commit. And he said, no, I can't say what happened. If it was the jock caused or not.
Sure.
Because you just don't do that. You got to ride against these guys all the time, and nothing happens. So
right.
There is
and it is a blessing he didn't fall off. That would have been a disaster.
Yeah.
He may not be around to talk about today.
He's very lucky.
He is very lucky.
First, that it happened at the beginning.
Right.
And it didn't happen in the middle of the race or at the top of the stretch where he stumbles.
Sure. Now, how do you? And I'm assuming jockeys do this. I don't know for sure. But how do you change goggles in the middle of a horse race? Because on a muddy track and the jockey can't see, I'm sure you have to I don't know if you do this, but I'm thinking a horse can see because they've got that third lid, right?
What happens is on a muddy track, we wear 5 goggles. And that's a frequently asked question. Excuse me, Fanny.
Okay.
Water?
You just drink some of that bourbon.
Yes.
That Boston bourbon.
What happens is when in a race, you pull all the goggles down over your eyes. Because if you have one here and one here, they're both going to get muddy at the same time.
Right.
So you take all the 6 goggles or 5 that you have on the top of your helmet, you bring them all over your eyes, and as you're racing, like I say, jockeys are thinking everything. They got to learn they got to watch where the horse is going. They got to switch sticks. They got to make sure the horse doesn't bother anybody, and they got to make sure they can see. So they pull down 1 pair of goggles. Sometimes they'll pull down half a pair till they can see again. When that gets muddy, they pull down the other side of that goggle, so now 1 pair is down, but they had 2 shots at it.
Right.
So then when that pair is gone, they repeat the same scenario with the second pair, 1 side down, then they pull down the other side, and then eventually they're all gone. So you got if you wear 5 pairs, you got basically 10 shots of seeing out of each different eye.
Okay, but when you say pairs, it's a goggle with 5 lenses, 1 goggle, or 5 pairs
5
of
pairs
goggles?
of goggles. I should have rephrased it.
Well, where do they go?
They fall on your neck.
Oh,
you
they
just
fall
pull
on
them
your
down,
neck.
you leave them on your neck. That's why after a race, you'll see a jockey and all his goggles are here and they're all muddy. You just don't want to go through them all.
Sure. But when you're going 1.5 miles in a race and on a muddy track, I'm thinking it's pretty messy. Right.
I was the worst because I rode some bad horses, and that's where I always was. I was at the back, and half the time I'm lucky to finish the race. My eyes are blinded, and I would have to go right to first aid and get my eyes washed out.
I bet.
I was the worst when it came to mud.
So when you're in the front,
Yes.
From the beginning of that race, is it a good thing occasionally? Because you often see it. The horse he leads for a mile, and then number 4 or number 3 passes him. So as the jockey, how do you position? How do you say, I should be, inside would make more sense because it's got to be shorter.
It is. Shortest way home is on the inside. That's the adage racing has. But it depends on the horse. Myself, I used to ride a lot of speed horses, and I used to want to be in front.
What does that mean?
Always want to be in front.
Okay, fast
or
horses.
near the pace, fast
Right.
horses. So I would try to make the lead as soon as I can, and then what we say is, then you're in control of the race. Then if you have enough horse, then you just try to slow them down. You take the reins, slow them down. So the slower they're going
right
up front, the faster they're going to run at the end.
Okay. Now what happens? You've got
Does
a
that make
horse
sense
acting.
there?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course it makes sense.
Gotta ask.
Coming from the mouth of a real jockey. Now, what happens when your horse is acting up and you're coming out, you're going into the Kentucky Derby or the Preakness, and you have a horse, and they always have that little parade in the paddock and all of that, and your horse is just nervous, not working out that well. So you take the horse out of the paddock or parade. What do you do? How do you relax a thoroughbred?
You basically talk to him in that last race, in the Belmont, they took the horse away from the other horses, the #1 horse. So what we do is, if he's acting up, you get permission from the stewards to take the horse away from the others. So you take him to the backstretch, the far side, and then you start walking him, patting him on the neck. Nice horsey, good horsey, please settle down.
Please settle down.
Please settle down. We have a long way to go, and you're wearing me out.
Right, I'm your friend.